In the winter of 2017, a resident's dog wandered into the dense, snow-covered woods of rural Barron County, Wisconsin, and returned carrying a piece of a human skull. When investigators sent that skull to the medical examiner, the case instantly escalated to a homicide. The bone showed a distinct contact-range bullet hole entering the back of the head. Detectives found themselves without a single lead. There was no wallet, no identifying markers, and missing persons databases across the entire region showed 0 candidates matching the profile of the victim or the 33 by 32 Wrangler jeans found with the bones. Without a name, detectives had no timeline, no suspects, and no motive. The victim became a John Doe, and for 3 long years, the case went completely cold. That changed in early 2020 when authorities handed the bones over to the DNA Doe Project. They extracted heavily degraded DNA from the skull and used a technique called investigative genetic genealogy, cross-referencing the victim's digital genome against public ancestry databases to find distant relatives. Volunteer genealogists mapped out an elaborate family tree. By following the genetic markers of distant cousins, they eliminated branches one by one until they landed on a single name, a 57-year-old Minnesota man named Gary Herbst. But when detectives looked into Gary Herbst, they found a jarring contradiction. His family in Minnesota insisted he was still alive. His wife, Connie, and son, Austin, had even told local police that Gary packed a bag, stole $5,000, and voluntarily drove off with a stranger 7 years earlier. This new identification revealed a 7-year, carefully orchestrated lie, maintained by the very people living under Gary's own roof. Investigators arrived unannounced at the nursing home where Connie and Austin worked. During the confrontation, Austin provided a highly detailed story about a sketchy, heavily tattooed man in a ripped shirt driving his father away. Detectives noted the story sounded completely rehearsed, like a teenager recalling a script. To find the truth, police turned to the people who shared a quiet suburban street with the Herbst family back in Elko, New Market, Minnesota. The neighbors remembered Gary perfectly. He was combative, widely hated, and known for intentionally blowing snow into other people's yards in the middle of the night. One neighbor caught Gary standing behind a window, secretly recording the neighborhood children with a camcorder. They also remembered a severe thunderstorm in the summer of 2013. Peering through the rain late at night, neighbors watched Connie and Austin vigorously scrub their basement floor. Then they saw the mother and son drag a massive rolled-up rug out of the house and heave it into the bed of Gary's pickup truck. One neighbor turned to her husband and said, "I think they finally killed him." Yet nobody called the police. When Connie and Austin held a garage sale weeks later to get rid of Gary's clothes and tools, those same neighbors simply walked over and bought his things. The community's collective disdain for Gary created the ultimate social shield. Because the neighbors were relieved he was gone, they effectively allowed a murder to be covered up in plain sight. Armed with the neighborhood's testimony, investigators secured a warrant to search the former Herbst home. They brought in Radar, a canine specifically trained to detect the scent of human decomposition. Radar bypassed the upper floors entirely. She honed in on a dark stain on the basement concrete, then tracked the scent to the sliding glass patio door, and finally out into the garage. Crime scene technicians applied luminol to those areas. The concrete, the drywall studs, and the track of the sliding door all lit up bright blue, mapping the exact path a bleeding body had been dragged out of the house 7 years prior. Confronted with the physical evidence during his next interrogation, Austin broke. He admitted that he had pulled a gun from underneath the living room couch and shot his father in the back of the head. Austin explained that they drove the body 2 hours east into Barron County. They dumped Gary in the woods, fully expecting that bears and coyotes would scatter the bones and permanently erase the evidence. A family can coordinate their alibis, and neighbors can look the other way, but the biological materials soaked into the foundation of a house eventually forces the truth to the surface. Austin's confession detailed years of severe, escalating physical abuse that Gary had inflicted on his mother. He maintained that his decision to pull the trigger was a desperate attempt to save her life. The judicial system weighed that history of domestic terror heavily. Instead of facing decades in prison, Austin was sentenced to 12.5 years. Connie, charged with aiding an offender after the fact, served just 3 months behind bars. Back in Elko, New Market, the reaction was startling. Neighbors characterized Gary's death as a service to the community, and one former resident even told reporters he hoped to help Austin out when he gets released. A son's violent desperation, a mother's silence, and a community's apathy successfully erased a man from the earth. 10 years ago, that combination would have been enough to keep Gary Herbst buried forever. But modern genetic genealogy ensures that the dead can now speak for themselves, identifying their own remains and pointing investigators right back to the people who put them there.